Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, a robotics and AI-focused search firm. And on today's episode, we are joined by Jenna Bryant, the co-founder, CEO, general partner at Embedded Ventures. They're an early-stage deep tech VC firm. Thanks for being here, Jenna.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, let's jump into it. So
Awesome.
Usually I start with the guest giving us an intro, and I want to dive into Embedded Ventures. I want to dive into a bit more about what you do and everything like that. But can you take a step back for us and share a bit more about your journey before you actually started Embedded Ventures?
Yes. So I definitely have had a non-linear path to venture. And I've always really balanced my love for art and technology, which is not hard to do living in Southern California. As a teenager, I auditioned for Beyonce's world tour.
Wow.
And very much thought that's what I was going to do when I grew up. But ended up pursuing a degree in fashion design, focusing on computer aided design. Really went to school just to get a degree. Really had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I graduated, it was around the time when Silicon Beach became a thing, and I had the opportunity to work actually at a boutique recruiting firm that was focusing on hard to fill engineering roles for early stage startups. Never imagined myself doing something like that either, but I needed to pay the bills, and I was like, perfect, I can do this commission only job while I'm figuring out everything else or whatever else I want to do with my life, going to dance classes, whatever. And that actually ended up being something that was a big pivotal kind of turning point for my adult professional career without really knowing it. I don't think anyone necessarily goes, "Ooh, I want to be a recruiter when I grow up." It's like you just kind of fall into it, and it's one of those things where you then go, "Oh wow, I actually really enjoy this." And so I ended up, transitioning to work for myself for many years. Still kind of balancing both, not really sure where I was going to land. And then, there was that time when LA really started to change and we saw, talent spinning out of SpaceX and starting companies and starting hard tech companies that were exciting and really interesting compared to some of the usual suspects here in LA. And that kind of is what made me transition into venture. And I can go more in that story if you want, but I'll stop there.
No, that's awesome. I love that you started out in recruiting, and you know what, you hit the nail on the head. No one really goes to college or wakes up one day and says, you know what, I want to be a recruiter. I want to get into the agency recruiting side of things.
Totally.
Yeah, you definitely fall into it, or people that have been successful and they introduce you to that world or whatever it is. But I'd really like to find out more of like those pivotal moments that led you into VC, because I can see like those dots connecting now, school, then getting that awareness of it all when you're in the recruiting world. But like, how did you end up in VC?
Well, I also never thought I would end up in the VC world. And I'd say the key part of that, especially once I was kind of already in the tech landscape, was because I didn't see anyone like myself in venture. I didn't necessarily need to know venture firms in order to have clients to recruit for. Most of them I found even sometimes before tier ones even knew about them. And so I kind of kept myself separate from them. I also worked out of startup offices fairly regularly and came into contact with VCs here or there, but just really did not think I had anything in common with them. And you know, sure, maybe with a lot I don't, but with certain ones, especially that are, popping up in the early stage of deep tech space, I have a lot in common
Yeah.
with those. And so as I was kind of thinking about where am I going to really be putting my time and what do I want to do really for the rest of my life? I did have this phase where I was like, I think tech is it for me. It was incredibly fulfilling. I felt like I could have the creative side of my life on my own terms. And so it actually was when I met an early stage deep tech firm that had just relocated from Boston to LA. They were looking for technical co-founders to complement a non-technical early founder at the pre-seed stage, or needing to build out their super early engineering team. I ended up partnering with them when they came to LA. Luckily, it was a really small firm. I got a lot of visibility. They were great to show me the ropes and make me feel comfortable, make me feel supported, and answer my millions of questions that came up once I got a peek behind the curtain, and be very patient with that as well. But also, understand the value that I was bringing to the team when I was uncovering whether it was a technical co-founder or new founders to evaluate, or building the team. They saw the value there, and I ended up contracting with them for a while and then joining full-time as a partner.
That's awesome. So
Yeah,
you actually started working with them on the recruiting front before
yeah,
you joined as a partner. That's great.
I did. I
Yeah,
did.
love that. It normally takes just one. It's kind of similar to the recruiting world. And, when you're in the agency side and you're starting a brand new
Mhm.
market, people are just like, go out and talk to people. Like,
Totally.
sometimes be vulnerable. People like to talk about their work. They like to talk about their space and tell them like, hey, I know what I do. What I do, I know well, but I want to learn more about what you do. And, having a good client to give you that
Yeah.
insight is
It was the
normally the
first time
turning
I
point.
actually was even curious about it,
Yeah.
to be honest. And I think part of that was because I really matter the people. It really matters what type of people you're around and who you're working with, which is why I was so selective with what clients I worked with.
Mm.
And they were interesting people that I wanted to, you know, ask questions and learn from, and also we're open to sharing. I do feel like a lot of investment firms or folks at the partner level at firms kind of keep things under lock and key. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of information that you can't get out of them. And so, that also helped.
That's great. That's great. So these experiences being on the recruiting side and then getting your first foot in the door on the recruiting side, I guess, as well,
Mhm.
and then being like a contract partner, etc. How has that experience shaped your now approach to VC in this sector? Because
Well, I'll say,
first, yeah,
no, I mean, in every way, it kind of has shaped my path. I'll kind of start with where we are now and then reverse it. But Embedded truly was like a group effort. It was, I definitely created the entity and then got Jordan as my co-founder, but it was all built by a really strong community that I have of engineers and leaders in the space that were in my life because of my previous previous career. And being a recruiter, you do have to kind of put your ego and everything aside, swallow your pride, and cold outreach people.
yeah,
And the power of cold outreach is really powerful. Some of the greatest mentors in my life I've met through cold outreach on LinkedIn. Jordan, my co-founder, I met through cold outreach on LinkedIn. And so, in addition to if we're kind of reversing it, just having a huge network of engineers at my doorstep already is really valuable, whether it's, getting to know or hearing about what startups are popping up, or what engineering talent is currently at a different company, and they have an idea and they're considering leaving to start a company. A lot of times they'll come to people like me and Jordan first, partially because we have more relatable backgrounds. It's a little less intimidating. We're like them.
yeah,
And so also then, when you're after you put a pre-seed or seed stage check into a company, one of the first things that they need is help recruiting.
yeah.
And so, having access to engineers with some of the most in-demand skill sets in the world is incredibly valuable. But also, it's those people who really helped get embedded off the ground, helped us kind of craft our thesis in the direction we wanted it to take. So, I'd say in every way, shape, or form, my former life has impacted what I do now.
That's awesome. So when you do invest in a company, you also help them with the talent side as well?
Yes, and actually, our official talent partner is Vonnie Williams. She's incredible.
I know Vonnie.
She's someone who, as a talent person, it's who the who I'm very passionate about it. There are certain ways that I've always appreciated doing things, and there are things that I really respect about certain leadership in the talent area, and then there are certain things and habits that I think are really toxic in the talent space. And Vonnie's someone that for a few years prior to starting Embedded, I had partnered with on several projects, and really, really respected her, valued her insights. She was the head of talent at the Honest Company beforehand,
Hmm.
before starting her own firm. And so she actually brought a lot of experience that I didn't have. I typically focused on super early stage startups, and then by the time they got their in-house talent person, I was long gone and on to the next thing. And so, yeah, she's honestly incredible. And so when it comes to Embedded's talent program, the bar was obviously really high, and I couldn't think of anyone other than Vonnie that I would trust with, kind of creating the infrastructure for that. And so we got really lucky to where we were able to get Vonnie as our talent partner. And so that's something that we collaborate on regularly, and we parachute in, help our founders in the super early days find that hard to find talent, and then parachute out once they
Yeah,
have kind of their own resources in place. But a lot of early stage founders actually don't even know how to manage a search firm or anything like that.
I know.
So we also kind of guide them when it comes time to work with anyone external and things like that.
That's awesome. Great
Yeah.
value add there for sure. And yeah, I've worked
Hmm.
with so many. I do a lot of like the seed to pre-seed to kind of series B, and it very
Yep.
much is like that. You get this check, everything's thrown at you, and you're like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? I've got
Totally.
these milestones to hit. I have a timeline. Clock's ticking. How am I going to recruit, manage, build the business, and do all of that? So yeah, it's a huge value add. I know Vonnie. I met Vonnie years ago when in my internal days. I think I was at Rubicon Project when she was at
Yes. Oh my God.
yeah
Yes.
at Honest Company around the corner with Leah, and then
I love
there
it.
was and then I was at Hyperloop. Yeah, all the built in
Small
LA
world.
events. We used to be at all the same events.
It's a small world, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. So, what inspired you to actually co-found Embedded Ventures? Was there like this gap that you saw in the market that you wanted to address, or why did you go out on your own after being with the firm?
Yeah, and so actually, Jordan Noon, my co-founder now, is someone who I got to know really well at my previous firm, and because he was outside of the portfolio, he's a co-founder and founding CTO of Relativity Space. At the time, he was still there,
Yeah,
and so he was someone that I got to know through various event series that I was leading and facilitating here in LA. And he became a peer and a good friend, and someone that I could go to when I needed kind of an outsider perspective. A lot of it was me getting the founder's perspective, and knowing that I can get the VC side, but really as a founder who had raised however many dollars in venture capital funding, what's your perspective? What do you like and not like about the way investors do their jobs? And kind of as we were doing that, or also getting his advice, it's always good to also have just like an outside perspective with navigating various things. So ended up, I think, slowly without really realizing, brainstorming and like daydreaming up the firm that we wanted to see exist. There were a lot of areas that I really wanted to see done differently, especially myself alone. I don't feel like I'm qualified to you know evaluate certain deep tech startups on my own. And I also really value having someone else who has the same stake in it as I do, who does have the engineering competency like Jordan to
yeah,
evaluate technically, not just from, even though advisors are incredible and very helpful, they don't have their personal they don't have their own money in the fund. They don't have certain stakes that when you're the fund manager or GP or partner at the partner level, there's a lot at stake. And so actually Jordan was who from the very early days, I had my sights set on him to be my co-founder, thinking it would be impossible. He was actually one of my very first advisors. And then a few months later was able to convince him. I know he was really eager to do something again from the ground up. And he had been super hands-on with helping me in those super early days decide, what's the thesis going to be? What areas are we going to dive into? Who's going to be my co-founder? I knew from the very beginning I didn't want to do this alone.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, making sure that in early stage deep tech, you're having to evaluate so many technical hypotheticals. This is technology that doesn't exist, that likely no one's done before. So there's a lot to evaluate there. And so knowing that I wanted, if not Jordan, someone like Jordan as my co-founder, and I can't think of doing it with anyone else. He's incredible. So
That's amazing. Very cool. And so let's talk about the early days, because nothing's ever smooth. Obviously,
no, it's not.
Starting and getting a name, getting your foot in the door, stuff like that. The early days with Embedded Ventures, what challenges did you face, and how did you overcome those?
Well, the first thing is I'm really kind of glad I didn't realize just how challenging and difficult it was going to be. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and I think it definitely was in this situation. Not being ignorant, but very much, what I didn't know actually served me well, because I would have probably been a bit more scared than I was. And there's a lot, that you have to learn from people like your lawyers. That's a very expensive way to learn things, but there's just a lot that until you actually go and do it and start your own firm, that you have to kind of learn on the fly. And so I'd say there were a lot of hurdles. Also, just as a woman in fund management, as an emerging manager with a super non-traditional background, it's really difficult to convince institutional investors, who are used to the same stereotype, to lean in and trust you. And it's hard to win over institutional investors anyway. And so with that on top of it, it's really difficult. And so we've been lucky to have, kind of access to a different type of network than probably most VCs when they're starting their own funds, and have a ton of entrepreneurs that have had successful outcomes or exits, and who have been early backers of ours and things like that. That's been incredible. But that's definitely been one of the hurdles. But creating Embedded was genuinely, like I said earlier, it was a group effort. It couldn't have been done alone. And I'm very thankful for that. And, we took our time. We also have always said we have patient capital. And so even in the early days when we were first starting, that was when people were in the money machine. Money was flying all over the place. And even early stage deep tech companies could do like one call with an investor and get, $10 million on a safe. It was a crazy time.
Yeah, I remember when you started, and at that time it was like everyone was about the moonshots. So deep tech was just able to raise capital pretty easily until money got more expensive, and the traditional software investors that have invested in hard tech have been like, "Ooh, actually, this isn't the same kind of ball game." Got spooked. So you've gone through that cycle now, and I guess.
Well, we didn't do any of that, though. Yeah. Well, the good thing is, and it frustrated founders. We didn't do any of that. As a female emerging manager, I'm not going to be throwing money around like the rest of them. Okay. Like how I'm sure every other woman in fund management understands kind of the weight that's on your shoulders. Yeah. And so we always have said we have patient capital. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go through a very thorough diligence process if you're going to be considered for us. And we did have founders during that time say, "Oh, well, we've been told by blank accelerator that we don't need to cognitive switch to have calls with investors because we can get money more easily than that." And like things like that, where I was like, I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, that's a lot of those companies aren't around now.
Exactly. No, exactly. And for us, it really paid off. Here we are. We've had no down rounds, no layoffs. Our portfolio is doing extremely well. And I do think that's just because we, stuck to our gut on a lot of things in the early days, and we're patient when others weren't. And it paid off.
Awesome. So this focus on deep tech, obviously it's very clear. Can you elaborate more on the specific areas within deep tech that you're focused on and maybe most excited about, and why?
Yeah, we actually ended up breaking our thesis into three areas. So we have digital engineering, advanced manufacturing, and space operations.
Okay.
Digital engineering is actually a software side of the portfolio, and that's kind of that critical infrastructure that helps advance hardware in the advanced manufacturing industry. And then space operations is pretty straightforward, but it's also people even now think about launch, and I'm like, well, launch is actually low cost and it's already here, so
Yeah.
we're well beyond launch at this point. And so yeah, that's how we've broken it down though, and I know it can be a bit broad or sound a bit broad, but it's actually fairly niche. And then we do also invest in companies that we hope have applications that can also serve the Department of Defense.
Hmm.
We have a first of its kind cooperative R&D agreement with the United States Space Force
Very
and
cool.
SpaceWorks, and that's something we're super proud of. My brother's a V-22 Osprey pilot in the Marine Corps, and a Naval Academy graduate. Also, we're very close. He's only 2 years older than me, so growing up, I was like, his biggest cheerleader as the younger sis, and so being able to um, have visibility into what's happening on the other side and communicate with each other and hope that technology that we're seeing that's so innovative and advanced that's available for the commercial market crosses over and can benefit people like my brother. This is really important and something that's personal to me. So
That's great.
that's kind of another part of it all too.
Love that. So there's the personal element as well.
Yeah.
So how do you personally, or you as a company, assess your potential investments? Like, what makes a startup stand out to you and the team?
Well, as I mentioned, we run a really thorough process and
Yeah.
we really have from day one. It's actually probably fairly difficult to even make it to the phone call phase. And for us, part of that is because we want to be respectful of people's time. If they're completely out of thesis, or if it's something that we've already looked at and aren't interested in, we do want to be respectful of people's time. And then also, if it's something that we still find interesting, but it's just not for us, we very much will do our best to connect founders with people that we know who are investing outside of our thesis.
Okay.
But for us, we really dive into those areas. We normally at any given time, which it does evolve daily, have kind of the areas within those areas that we're diving into. Again, we have patient capital, so it has to be really intriguing for us to really dive in. And then our diligence process, it really starts as just like an intro call kind of thing. We keep those pretty casual. And by the time we get on a call, we know a lot about them. We study as much as we can, even before an intro call, and come in with a lot of questions and know if it's going to even get past that phase. And if we decide to move into actual pre-diligence, or even our like pre-diligence, involves bringing in a team of 5 of our advisors to kind of dive into various areas for us. And then that kind of ignites whether they go into full diligence or not. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty thorough, but
Yeah, it
it's
sounds like
normally
it.
from founders, they actually end up really appreciating it. And most of them, or all of them actually so far, have said that they really enjoyed it. Because also everyone that we have on calls, we make sure it's not Groundhog Day. We make sure everyone's in the loop. We even let them know, like, do not start a call with like intro stuff that's already been covered. We already know how we know each other, all of those things. It's like dive right into these certain areas. And so we do try to make it as impactful for the founders as well. And also everyone that we have advising us and helping us out on the diligence side, they all have carry in the fund. So they're invested as well. And they are all very well primed and really seasoned in certain areas and people that those founders would want to know anyway. And so for us, we're like, look, even if it doesn't result in a check, these are people that are going to be helpful for you even beyond this. And if you kind of make it to that point, then we're probably going to be cheerleaders for you regardless. And so we like to think that it ends up being mutually beneficial.
Yeah, there's value created regardless there from a
Yeah,
contact point or anything. Love that. And then you've also
definitely.
got from your side, well, actually from the company side, they know, they know that they've got committed investors that understand the
For sure.
business, that have like conviction in what they're doing, and you guys are going to see it through like tough times and everything like that, and make the right introductions for them as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because deep tech, it's longer exit timelines. You spend a lot of time with your founders.
Right.
And so it's a long-term relationship. And we like it. We really want it to work both ways. I know that there's memes going around about value add investors, all over Twitter saying like, but do they really add value? And for us, because our portfolio is not, we don't have a spray and pray model. Like our portfolio is pretty small and niche, and we do really enjoy working closely with our founders. Of course, we don't want to, be overbearing in areas where we're not going to be helpful, but there are certain areas, especially when it comes to gov affairs and recruiting, and then even, of course, Jordan's experience as someone who's done this before, where we're extremely valuable. And there are areas that a lot of times are pain points for the startups that we're investing in as well. And so normally there's that kind of mutual respect and trust and excitement to work together that goes along with the check.
I can only imagine. Yeah. You need all of that, especially at that early stage. And you guys are primarily pre-seed and seed, you said?
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yep.
Can you share a story?
We've done some later stage investments through like SPVs and things like that.
Okay.
But for the core fund, that's the thesis.
Are they add on? Excuse me, frog in my throat. Are they add on to the existing ones that you've already done, or are they like ones you found out about later on and then you just get involved?
Within the fund, we definitely have reserves for follow-on investments in our existing portfolio. And then with SPVs, it's if it's, outside the thesis, outside the stage. And so, or certain they have to have synergy with the portfolio. So definitely only opportunistic SPVs that, tie in. But our core thesis for the fund is early stage.
Love that.
And that's where we can roll our sleeves up and really have a lot of fun. Obviously, at the later stage investing is, very different. But also for us in terms of, what we love day to day, we really love being involved with our founders.
Yeah. That's the same.
Yeah, you get it.
Yeah, I'm the same with the hiring standpoint, because especially because my recruiting journey, I was on the agency side, and then I went internal for, 6 years or something, up to the point of leading the whole department, and before I started my business. So when you understand both sides of it, those early stage companies really get that value, or you can provide that value to them, because again, they don't know what they don't know. And sometimes first time founders who haven't built a team, like you said before, don't know how to work with a search firm or structure an interview process or anything like that. It's so much extra value.
Yes, even incredible founders who have an insane level of polish, even if they're first time founders. The candidate experience, as you know, is really hard to get right, especially when you're convincing people to potentially take a pay cut from their job where they're perfectly happy to come join this startup. You really have to prove that you can be trusted as a founder, and the red carpet really has to be rolled out. And a lot of the nuances there, first time founders don't know anything about, even if they are, exceptionally qualified. There's still a lot to learn there. Even founders who have already done it before.
I know. That's what I was going to say.
Always changing.
Yeah, they sometimes have the blinkers on to that, because and you probably don't invest in people like this, but I've worked with founders like this that aren't very self-aware, or have like this, I don't want to say like an ego complex or something, but they're like, well, this is the best thing anyone's ever going to get the opportunity to work on. Of course, they'd want to work here. We'll get back to them when we can. It's like, well, if they're comparing you to other places, that experience, again, if they're taking a pay cut, if they have to relocate, if this is like a title shift, that's all so important. Not just that it's a cool project to work on. There's a lot more that goes into a decision when someone's considering a full-time role. And especially in this space where, it's been rife with layoffs or funding's been difficult and stuff, people need to be committed, but no, it's more than just a cool project, because you can find those like, dime a dozen, but
definitely,
can you really see yourself here long term? Because not only are the time horizons for investment and all of that longer, but for the product, for the R&D, for the product development, for the release, all of that stuff, getting commercial agreements, we're talking years. So they need to see that. It's
super tedious.
Yeah.
It's super tedious. And it's, I'm sure you remember the days when it was like, it was, I feel like things kind of did a wave. It was like
Hmm.
in the early days of like Silicon Beach and stuff, it was like, people, I mean, the pay cuts people were making back in the day
Yeah.
was nuts, and then then enough people kind of did that and saw it not go well to where then people were like, well, I kind of need some balance here. And now, I'd say over the last decade, like so much has changed just in terms of how people think about joining startups.
Right.
And I remember back then it would be like, oh, you didn't want the person who wasn't excited to take the pay cut because the equity meant something to them.
Uh-huh.
And then everyone went through this big shift where it's like, well,
I've seen my
enough people
equity go
kind
to
of
zero. So
right, enough people experience the downside just
yeah.
industry across the entire industry to where they're like, well, I kind of value both. I
And
definitely
then
value both.
yeah.
And then
And
throw
then
in
you
deep
had
tech, and
this
now it's crazy.
yeah. And then you had the like Snaps of the world, Snap and Bird that came in and they're like, well, we're
Yeah.
gonna pay top of Silicon Valley in Silicon
Yes.
Beach and then completely throw everything out of whack. So
I
everyone's
mean, everything has
competing with that.
changed.
Yeah. It's
It's
wild.
nuts. It's
So
nuts. I know
funny.
that you've seen a lot of it too. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
um,
Uh,
it's been wild.
yeah,
But
it
yeah, you're
definitely
right.
has.
You're right. And founders, even, I'd say a lot of founders do get, especially first time founders, get humbled pretty quickly, even if they are like, it's sometimes endearing for founders to be like, well, of course they'd want to work with us. Hello. But then, normally that gets checked at the door pretty
Right,
fast
yeah.
when candidates kind of give them a run for their money.
I
So,
know, I know. It's definitely a learning curve for them for the first time as well, right? Even what like market
right.
rates are and how to navigate all of that and just the whole EVP that you're putting together for someone.
Hmm.
How critical for you is the composition of like the startup team in those early stages of its development, whether it's like when you're actually looking to invest or even as you're helping them get to that next stage of funding?
It's super important. We always say in the early days you can't undo a bad hire,
Hmm.
and it's the truth. Founding teams and beyond. First of all, creating the right, especially in deep tech, a lot of times there are two founders,
Yeah,
and really evaluating that dynamic to begin with is important. And then those early engineering hires, which are typically the first hires that they need, um, are really critical. And it, you not only want to make good decisions, but then you want to focus, even though you're early, you want to focus on how to keep everyone happy and retention, and you want to keep people for as long as possible, knowing that these are longer exit timelines. It takes a long time to develop these technical solutions and products. And so, there's a lot there in terms
yeah,
of just keeping every, even, you know, the early talent happy and excited and motivated and all those things, even through crazy times
yeah, it's
or
true.
times where it's like, when are we going to get there? Um, so you have to pull all the tricks out of the hat.
It's true. How much weight do you put on the team? Or I guess at that pre-seed stage, sometimes it's just like the founding team, right? But how much weight do you place on that versus the tech or the product or the progress that they've already made?
Well, a lot of times we invest in companies that haven't actually made anything yet.
Mm,
A lot of times they obviously have to have that technical competency, whether it's through their career experience or education experience, and that kind of blends into the founding team. It's who are they as people? Are they people who engineers who are mature in their career, who are the best in their field, are going to trust and respect and enjoy reporting to? But then also, do they have the technical depth and competency to actually execute on this hypothetical? Do they know themselves enough to know what they don't know,
mm,
and know where their gaps are? And those are things it's really hard for founders to admit what they don't know. But for us, it's really important because we really do highlight what are the biggest risks. And normally it's what are the areas that they aren't as strong in. And we focus on us helping strengthen that, whether it's through talent or us helping teach them or whatever it is. And so a lot of it does kind of um, blend with the technical competency, but also the personality of the founding team. And of
mm.
course, if it's a solo founder versus two founders, there's a lot of dynamics there that have to be considered. And then can they execute on this hypothetical? How do they handle pressure? How do they, do we think that they're that invested in it to, see it for the long haul? And then will the market be ready by the time the product is ready? Because the product isn't ready yet. And we normally there isn't much progress at the time when we write a check. Normally we're, having to really guess about how long do we think it'll take for them to engineer this thing. And then will the market be ready at that point? And that's one of the harder parts of the job.
Sounds like it. Let's shift gears and talk about the industry as a whole. How would you categorize the current state of the hard tech, deep tech space right now?
I mean, it's really a wild time. I don't know. It's exciting. There's a ton happening. I don't even know how to characterize it. Um,
I
Something
think
I'm
it's a
excited
wild
about.
time is a great is a great phrase.
It's a little
Yeah.
wild west too,
Yeah.
but it's exciting. I use and I'll touch kind of on a interesting company in our portfolio that actually we spun it out of the fund. We incubated it. Originally it
Nice.
was called KittyCAD, and now we renamed to Zoo. And KittyCAD is the design API side of the business, but it was actually based off a gap in the industry in the software for hardware space where um, we felt that mechanical CAD was just super dated, archaic, and not helping facilitate the advancement of the hardware industry. And there were a lot of fences that things were having to be thrown over. And so we started KittyCAD at the time to bridge that gap. And then now, here we are a few years later. It's doing extremely well. Now Zoo, KittyCAD, again, being the design side of the business, design API side of the business, Elephant being the machine learning side of the business. It's a zoo. And we have kind of the developer platform where, you can create your own tools and build on top of our infrastructure. But then we also have some pre-built tools that started out as starter tools, just to kind of show what we're building on top of our geometry engine, and that's modeling app and text to CAD. And so seeing, how machine learning can impact the mechanical design space is something that we're really excited about. You've seen it kind of seep into many other areas, but not
Yeah.
as much on that side. So play around with text to CAD and modeling app, and kind of seeing all of them come together is going to be exciting. But for me, just in general, I'm on the AI machine learning space. I'm really excited just because Zoo is front and center. We're also co-founders of it. And so we're kind of involved in day-to-day operations as well. So seeing what's possible there, what we've already executed on, but also what the future looks like is really exciting. It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild time. I love that.
What
That's
about
very
you?
cool.
How do you characterize it?
I mean, I think it's going to be hard to say anything better than it's a wild time. I think that there's so much happening right now, especially with, AI being in the press and everyone either being aware of it or adopting it. And now that's bringing so many more investment dollars to the space. The ripple effect of that. I mean, generative AI is amazing and it's really cool and I use it and stuff like that. But I'm looking at that ripple effect and what that means for all the hard tech space and robotics and manufacturing and everything else like that, what that's going to do for that. So I think we're like on the cusp of some crazy stuff happening. Obviously, there's a lot of dollars going into like humanoids and stuff like that, which might still be a little bit ways away. But the more reachable tech that is going to impact, and those investment dollars, like once they spread out a bit more, like Amazon committing their new fund to robotics, AI, ML tech, and things like that. I think it's such an exciting time. I'm just so thankful that
It really is.
stuck to this and I'm involved in it and able to help in my own little way because it's just exciting.
Yes. Yeah, you get to see it all from the ground up.
Right.
And it's cool.
Yeah.
It's deep tech is very fun.
Very fun.
Anyone who's not in deep tech is really missing out.
I think so. So let's look at the future then, with all of that in mind. What do you think the biggest opportunities for growth and innovation are in this space over the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, for us, our portfolio thesis kind of fits into all of that. We are, again, here for the long haul, and our timelines are pretty long. And so those three areas, for me, zoo is always a great example of something novel that I'm really excited about, just in terms of the infrastructure that can help accelerate all of the other things. In order to make all of this awesome hard tech, you have to design it. And so, kind of seeing from the ground up what needs to change is always fun. And then, of course, just anything, because launch is now low cost, so we call it. It's just crazy what can be enabled, and I feel like we're what we thought was sci-fi, 5 years ago, is not anymore. And so it's unbelievable, some of the things that we look at and go, oh, this is real. It's actually possible. This is crazy.
I know. I
It's
know.
cool. There's so much. There's
Yeah.
honestly so much that I'm excited about that it's even hard to bucket into one thing, really. There's just so much. What about you?
Yeah, I love when I get asked questions as well.
Sorry, I'm excited to get your take too.
We need to get you a podcast.
No.
I guess I reflect what you're saying. I think that the biggest areas personally, and I mean, I'm biased, but I think that robotics and automation as a whole is probably the biggest areas of growth and that is a kind of an overarching like technology in this respect, because it impacts so many areas. Obviously,
It
space.
does.
I mean, you look at all the off-world technology that they're trying to do right now. That's really cool.
Yes.
Manufacturing, logistics, food, all of it, agriculture,
Mhm.
all of that can be impacted by robotics and AI. And I think
Yep.
if I was going to hedge it on one thing, it would probably be robotics, just because of like we've seen the impact that stuff like COVID had on the working population. We still haven't recovered from that. The generations that are coming now don't want to do manual things. But then also from a bottom line perspective, you look at it, the stuff that you can put in place from a technology standpoint, that can work 24/7 consistently, not take a day off, all of that stuff. It's a no-brainer when you look at it.
Yep.
I think the biggest hurdles have been cost and then also adoption for some of these like more old school industries where they're like, oh, I don't want a robot. Or what does that mean? Who's going to look after that thing?
Yeah. It is starting to change, though,
Yeah.
luckily. Even in the construction space, there are certain
Sure.
areas that historically have been slower to adopt that are really leaning into it. And I also, with certain industries like that, it's really fun to think about also, and important to think about, how automation and things like that can make job sites safer,
Yeah.
or take some of the risk out of the human element side of things for certain areas. So yeah,
100%.
it's cool.
Yeah, 100%. That's a big part of it, right? People don't want to
Mhm.
be injured, burned. Employees don't want to deal with workers' comp, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. We sometimes I'll call people that we work with some of the laziest engineers that I know, which is actually a huge compliment, because anyone that makes something really automated so they can do less but get
Very
more
efficient.
done, I'm like, I love this.
Yeah.
Automation is great.
If it's working for you, it's going to work for a lot more people. So keep it.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and
Yes.
wrap things up. But before we
Thank
finish, just reflecting on your career, your achievements, where you're at right now, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs or investors who are looking to enter this space?
I always say you don't have to do it alone. I've learned so much from the people around me and continue to learn from them. And so many people are actually really eager to help. I always encourage people to ask for help when they need it, ask for advice when you need it. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Trust me, I've asked every question under the sun. And I've been really inspired by people that I didn't expect to lean in and be excited to help, who have helped me. And it's hard to ask for help. It's, especially for me, I get imposter syndrome, or I get intimidated or worry that, am I supposed to already know this thing? But it's very much been the people around me and around our entire team who have helped us get here. And then you really have to put your blinders on and really ignore the hype, ignore Twitter, X. You have to ignore some of the smoke and mirrors and the noise that's happening. And for me, it's been so valuable to just trust my gut, lean on our instincts and trust the areas that we're interested in because we're interested in them, not because other people are talking about them. Yeah, so it's really been kind of, you don't have to do it alone, but also like ignore the hype and really, stick to your gut on things. There's
People
so
do.
much.
Yeah, there is so much. And you just end up following those waves and everything, everyone that was investing in crypto and blockchain before and then decide to
Yes.
repurpose that to AI because they're chasing that and whatever it is. I've mentioned it a few times on the show, but it's like you've got to really be convicted and knowledgeable about what you're doing, what you're following, and have a bigger reason than just everyone else says it's cool or it's the
Right.
next thing.
And it's sometimes, I mean, people in our spaces, are really active on social media.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not that person. I follow, I'm lurking for sure. But there are certain things that I see that I'm like, oh my gosh, first of all, when do these people work? Like, how do they have time to
I
do all
see
of
some
this?
of that as well.
They're tweeting all day. Like
Yeah.
someone posted, I think it was VC Braggs posted the other day, like, and it was a retweet of someone's schedule. It was like, do you have it to be in venture capital? And it was like 10 to 12 Twitter, 12 to 2 brunch. I was like, no, that's not what I do. Like my day is back to back to back.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'll go, does anyone know what happened? Does anyone know what happened on Twitter today? At the very end of my day. But it's also, that stuff can be distracting. It can also be intimidating, or it can make you wonder, like, I don't know, do people care? Whatever,
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's
You
like, you just have
can't
to
overthink it. Yeah. Yeah.
can't overthink it or care what anyone else thinks, to be honest.
100%. That's great. Well, look, thank you so much. Let's wrap up. I really appreciate your time, your insights, everything that you've shared here. I think it's going to be a great listen for a lot of people. Even though you're not posting a lot, where can people follow you or find out more about any upcoming projects, initiatives, things from you and Embedded Ventures?
No, thank you. And I do love LinkedIn. As you know, you reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love that. It's obviously something I've done a ton. So I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn. And I love when people if they add a note that says, I listened to your podcast, whatever. I will absolutely connect with you, and I'll be excited, to follow your journey. My email is jb@embedded.ventures. I've always had it out there. I want to make sure we're available. So don't hesitate to reach out. And then something that I'm really passionate about right now is expanding my network of women in fund management, as well as other women in deep tech and women who write checks into deep tech funds. There aren't very many, unfortunately. And so I'll be, visiting several cities actually over the next few months, just trying to bring networks together, trying to expand my own network. Just because I am a woman doesn't mean that other female fund managers fall out of the sky for me. So I'm always eager to connect and get to know other women that I can learn from, and just kind of having my network and community, because we all need each other. So that's something I'm also super passionate about. So if anyone listening knows anyone that I should be getting to know, don't hesitate to reach out and connect us. And I always say, and I try to do my best at always returning the favor or paying it forward. So
love that. Wow. That was great. Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.